To that conversation we had earlier on, of course, Niger Coup, and I am joined by Professor Kwesi Aning. He's the Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center in Ghana. Good morning, I guess, to you, Professor Kwesi. Let's just start off, of course, with what's happening in the country at the moment. Some of the factors, of course, that the army there is raising is that there is rising insecurity in the country. What other factors do you think is leading, or has led to the coup happening in Niger?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to be clear. The coup in Niger has not come as a surprise. It was always bound to happen. The question is the timing. When France was kicked out of Mali and President Bazoum, without much analysis, accepted that France comes to Niger, that basically sealed his fate. So one is the unwanted presence of France in Niger. The second, of course, relates to worsening economy. The third, the ethnic tensions within the political party of Bazoum himself and the personality clashes between him and former President Issoufou, and of course, the worsening insecurity. Let me say this though, that the underpinning factors that have led to the coup in Niger were fairly present in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea. The question is, which country is next?
Right, let's just move on to the next question. Of course, you mentioned France, and we have seen that there's a bit of Russia coming in, of course, into in Niger, and it's sort of being welcomed there. Can you tell us what's really going on when it comes to Russia coming into Niger?
No, I don't think it's so much Russia coming into Niger as the terribly disrespectful behavior of France to its former colonies, an unwillingness and an unpreparedness to accept that these are sovereign countries with agency and that France cannot treat them nor speak to them in a manner that, disrespects their national identity. So if we take this particular case, the case of Niger, when the military took over, one of the first things they did was to close the country's airspace. France consistently flouts it and lands its jets at the military bases. Secondly, the language, the type of language used by the foreign minister is quite disrespectful. So although both countries have a long history, when one party doesn't want to understand and accept and respect that the nature of that relationship has changed over time, then that becomes a problem.
Right, we know that Niger has had a total of 7 coups d'etat and at least 3 has been successful. But then in your opinion, what consequences does this specific coup have on Niger and of course the entire Sahel region at large?
Well, on Niger itself, there may be a period of instability. I'm not too sure whether General Chani will be able to hang on to power and there will not be a counter coup, which will be disastrous. Furthermore, I'm not too sure how this is going to help, the position of the youth in terms of jobs. So Niger itself is in a pretty dire economic situation. We know that the Chinese are there with a couple of billions of investment in the uranium mines and also in building the longest oil pipeline on the continent. So there are things beginning to move a little bit in a much more positive economic direction. But that is going to take a pretty long time. The much wider import of the coup is what and how other militaries on the sub-region that are facing democratically elected governments that are corrupt, that do not respect the rule of law, that do not respect the constitutional provisions of their own electoral victory, will interpret those domestic imperatives. And that is how and why Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Niger will have a very, wide impact on stability, not only in the Sahel, but also in the coastal states of West Africa.
Right. Maybe final question though. Now we can talk about, let's say, the mediation, of course, that's going on there. We know that ECOWAS has given the coup leaders at least 1 week to return to civilian rule or face sanctions. How do you think ECOWAS, together with AU, is handling the mediation process in Niger at the moment?
Well, I think the very first step itself is riddled with controversy. They both agreed that President Idris Deby of Chad leads the charge. Now, this is a man who himself has not been democratically elected. That's number one. I think the hastiness with which ECOWAS's leaders have threatened to use force is actually wrong. It is that probably is being used as a carrot and stick. Let's get them around the table and let's have a conversation. But if and when the 1 week passes, and I know ECOWAS cannot put together an intervention force within 1 week or within 6 months, the organization then loses credibility. So my suggestion to ECOWAS and also the African Union is that instead of waiting for crisis to happen and automatically saying we have suspended you, we will intervene, you are going under sanctions, to have set a criteria of assessment that says, look, corruption in your country is too high, it goes against the protocol on corruption, so do something about it. So a checklist that sends signals to member states who have voluntarily signed on to these normative frameworks and documents that, look, as supranational institutions, we have the power to check your performance. If they don't do that, we will see more coups. There are problems on this continent. The youth bulge, impact of environmental destruction, and a sense of exclusion from politics and national wealth, a sense of victimhood, all are coming together to combine in dangerous ways, added to the shifting geopolitics of who our friends are. So those who win power through the ballot box are now expected